You've spent your entire life trying to figure out what you did wrong. Every time you looked into her eyes, you hoped to finally see the warmth other daughters talk about. But instead, you just found a cold mirror. Today, we are exposing the silent, devastating ways a narcissistic mother shatters a daughter's soul. It starts before you even have the words to describe it. You just know that love in your house feels incredibly dangerous. It isn't a safe harbor where you can rest. It's a battlefield where you are always auditioning for her approval. And the most heartbreaking part? You genuinely believed that you were the problem. You look at other families and wonder what you missed. They seem to have this effortless bond, a natural comfort. But for you, every interaction with her feels like walking on shattered glass barefoot. You carefully weigh every word, terrified of setting off that familiar, sudden rage. It is exhausting to live this way. Society tells us that a mother's love is unconditional. We are sold this beautiful image of absolute sacrifice and nurturing grace. So, when your reality looks like a psychological war zone, you feel incredibly isolated. You carry this dark secret, convinced that if you speak up, the world will turn its back on you. She doesn't just want a child, she wants a perfectly compliant extension of herself. You are not allowed to have your own feelings, your own boundaries, or your own dreams. If your light shines a little too bright, she suddenly steps in to dim it. Your success somehow feels like a direct threat to her fragile ego. And then there are the subtle, cutting remarks. They aren't always screaming matches. Sometimes, it's just a heavy sigh, a raised eyebrow, or a backhanded compliment that completely dismantles your confidence. She knows exactly where your deepest insecurities live, because she is the one who carefully planted them. You grow up feeling like a supporting character in her grand, never-ending tragedy. When she is upset, the entire house must hold its breath. You become highly attuned to her micro-expressions, learning to read the room before you even step inside. You became a psychological expert just to survive your own childhood. But deep down, there is this desperate, lingering hope. You keep thinking that if you just achieve enough, if you are just perfect enough, she will finally see you. You bend over backwards, twisting your soul into knots for a single crumb of validation. But the goalpost always moves. It is never, ever quite enough. It is a profound, silent grief. You are mourning a mother who is still very much alive. You are grieving the emotional safety you were denied from the moment you took your first breath. Recognizing this isn't an act of betrayal against her. It is the very first step in finally choosing to rescue your own beautiful life. This is the hidden reality of the narcissistic mother and her daughter. It is a dynamic built on control, masked brilliantly as maternal concern. But you are not crazy, and you are no longer alone in the dark. Let's break down exactly how this toxic cycle operates, so you can finally begin to untangle yourself from it. To understand her, you must look beneath the mask of perfection she wears for the outside world. To everyone else, she is the ideal, sacrificing mother. They see a charming, devoted woman. But you know the heavy, suffocating atmosphere that drops the second the front door closes. You know the absolute chill of her gaze. A narcissistic mother views her daughter as absolute property. You are not viewed as a separate human being with a distinct soul. You are a mirror, existing solely to reflect her idealized image back to her. When you make her look good, you are momentarily rewarded. When you don't, you are swiftly and brutally punished. This creates an intense, deeply confusing trauma bond. She alternatingly plays the role of your cruelest critic and your fragile victim. One moment, she is tearing down your self-worth. The next, she is weeping, demanding that you comfort her for the pain she just caused you. It makes your own reality feel entirely fake. Notice how she constantly hijacks your pivotal moments. Your graduation, your wedding, your deepest heartbreaks. Somehow, she makes it all about her. If you are grieving, her grief is suddenly much worse. If you are celebrating, she needs to be the center of attention. She quite literally steals your emotional oxygen. Then comes the devastating weapon of triangulation. She loves to compare you to your siblings, her friends' daughters, or even total strangers. She deliberately manufactures competition to keep you completely off balance. By making you feel inadequate, she ensures you will keep striving desperately for her elusive love. She weaponizes guilt like a master tactician. Every sacrifice she ever made is meticulously tallied in a ledger that you can never pay off. When you attempt to set a healthy boundary, she immediately accuses you of being ungrateful and selfish. She twists the narrative until you are genuinely apologizing for her abuse. Projection is her favorite psychological shield. Whatever deep shame or jealousy she harbors within herself, she violently hurls onto you. If she is insecure about her aging, she will suddenly criticize your appearance. You become the designated emotional dumping ground for all the toxic waste she refuses to process. She operates with a staggering lack of emotional empathy. She might know the correct words to say, but there is no warmth behind them. When you come to her in tears, seeking comfort, she looks at you with a blank, impatient stare. Your genuine vulnerability is viewed not as a human need, but as an annoying inconvenience. You are dealing with someone who genuinely believes they are flawlessly superior. Any slight disagreement is perceived as a vicious, unforgivable attack on her character. She does not want a genuine relationship built on mutual respect. She demands complete subjugation. You are either entirely with her or her mortal enemy. This psychological warfare rewires your developing brain. You learn to silence your own intuition because she constantly tells you that your feelings are wrong. You start second-guessing every choice you make. The tragedy is that her hypercritical, demanding voice eventually becomes your own internal, daily monologue. There always comes a day when the illusion finally fractures. You are older now, maybe you have a family of your own, or maybe you just hit your absolute breaking point. You do something completely normal. You say the word, no. It is a tiny two-letter word. But to a narcissistic mother, it sounds like an act of war. The shift in the atmosphere is instantaneous and terrifying. The mask slips, revealing a cold, hollow fury you have never fully seen before. She doesn't just get annoyed. She experiences a massive narcissistic injury. How dare her extension rebel? How dare her carefully controlled puppet suddenly cut its own strings? This is when the smear campaign inevitably begins. She realizes she can no longer control you, so she immediately moves to control how others see you. She calls the relatives. She cries to the neighbors. She paints a masterful picture of a heartbroken, loving mother who has been cruelly abandoned by an unstable daughter. You watch in horror as people you love take her side. They tell you to just make peace, reminding you that she is your mother and she won't be around forever. They don't understand the decades of quiet, agonizing abuse you endured. They only see her carefully crafted tears. The isolation in this moment is overwhelming. She will try to hoover you back in with absolute precision. Suddenly, she sends a nostalgic gift or a message acting as if nothing happened. It is the bait. She wants to see if the emotional leash is still attached to your neck. If you respond, the cycle just resets. If you stay silent, her silent rage escalates further. You start to see her manipulations with crystal clarity. The fog of obligation is finally lifting from your exhausted mind. You recognize the gaslighting the moment it leaves her lips. You see the deliberate setups. You realize that she never actually wanted to fix the relationship. She only wanted to restore the dominance. The grief in this phase is incredibly visceral and deep. You are not just stepping away from a toxic person. You are burying the fantasy of the mother you desperately needed. You are accepting that the maternal warmth you crave simply does not exist within her. It is a devastating, heartbreaking truth to swallow whole. She will aggressively play the victim to anyone who will listen. She will rewrite history to completely erase her own abusive actions. In her twisted narrative, your necessary self-protection is framed as unprovoked, malicious cruelty. She will demand endless apologies for boundaries you had every legal right to build. But you stand your ground, even as your hands physically shake. You realize that protecting your peace is vastly more important than protecting her fragile ego. The profound guilt she programmed into you flares up, screaming that you are a terrible daughter. But you take a deep breath, and you let that toxic guilt burn out. This turning point changes the trajectory of your entire life. You are cutting the invisible, suffocating umbilical cord of emotional abuse. The fallout is messy, chaotic, and incredibly painful. But for the very first time in your life, you are breathing your own air. You are finally stepping into your own radiant light. As you maintain your distance, the psychological collapse begins. The narcissistic mother cannot process genuine rejection, so she builds a fortress of profound denial. She convinces herself that you are just confused, bitter, or heavily influenced by someone else. She will never, ever look inward to examine her own faults. The consequences for her are profoundly tragic and lonely. She pushes away the one person who tried hardest to genuinely love her. Her world becomes incredibly small, populated only by those who still buy into her artificial facade. She sits on a throne of self-righteous victimhood, completely ruling over a hollow, empty kingdom. But we need to look at the consequences for you, the survivor. Leaving doesn't instantly magically heal the deep wounds. You are left dealing with a harsh, relentless inner critic. You struggle intensely with perfectionism, deeply afraid that any small mistake makes you utterly unlovable. The trauma echoes in your daily life. You find yourself over-explaining your simplest decisions. You apologize to people for things that aren't even your fault. Because you were raised in a chaotic, unpredictable emotional environment, genuine peace actually feels terrifying. You keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, even when you are completely safe and secure. Intimate relationships become a complex, difficult battlefield. You may accidentally attract partners who mirror her exact toxic traits, because that dynamic feels like home. Or you push incredibly loving people away, terrified they will eventually consume you just like she did. Trusting others feels like a life or death risk. There is also a profound, physical toll on your exhausted body. Years of walking on eggshells keeps your nervous system locked in constant survival mode. You battle chronic fatigue, intense anxiety, or autoimmune issues. Your body is physically keeping the score of the emotional war you fought blindly throughout your childhood. The narcissist mother's legacy is a deeply fractured sense of self. When you spend your formative years acting as a mirror for someone else, you never learn who you actually are. You know what you like based on what kept her happy. Discovering your genuine identity in adulthood feels incredibly daunting and painfully lonely. Yet, amidst all this wreckage, a quiet, powerful resilience blooms. You realize that surviving her required immense psychological strength. The extreme empathy she exploited is actually your most beautiful, defining superpower. You didn't become cold like her. You remained beautifully human, despite the agonizing fire you walked. You slowly start dismantling the lies she ruthlessly fed you. You realize that her inability to love you was never a reflection of your true worth. It was always a glaring reflection of her absolute brokenness. You were always inherently worthy of love, care, and deep respect, right from the very moment you were brought here. The hardest consequence to accept is the total lack of closure. She will never give you the heartfelt apology you so desperately deserve. she will never sit down and acknowledge the profound damage she caused. You have to learn how to completely close the door yourself, locking it from the inside, and bravely walking away. Healing from a narcissistic mother is not a linear, easy path. It is a messy, beautiful rebellion against the darkness you were born into. Some days, the grief will absolutely knock the wind right out of your lungs. Other days, you will feel a profound, soaring sense of freedom that you never believed was truly possible. You must learn to fiercely and aggressively protect your newly found peace. Your boundaries must become walls of solid steel. When the guilt creeps in, remind yourself that you are not punishing her. You are simply refusing to be a casualty of her unhealed trauma. You are actively breaking a toxic, generational curse here and now. Start radically mothering yourself in the ways she absolutely failed to. Speak to your inner child with immense gentleness, validating every single emotion she was forced to suppress. Buy yourself the things you were denied. Celebrate your own victories with profound joy. Become the safe, warm harbor you always desperately needed. Surround yourself with chosen family who see your genuine worth. True love does not require you to shrink, perform, or abandon your own truth. Find the people who celebrate your beautiful light instead of trying to desperately extinguish it. You get to carefully curate the incredible family that your soul actually deserves. Forgiveness is not a strict requirement for your complete healing. You do not have to absolve her of the horrific damage she willingly inflicted just to find your own peace. Radical acceptance is vastly more powerful. Accept exactly who she is, accept that she cannot change, and release the heavy burden of trying to save her. As you continue to fiercely heal, your true, authentic self emerges. The vibrant, passionate woman she tried so hard to bury finally takes her very first deep breath. You discover passions, quirks, and a brilliant voice that belongs entirely to you. You are no longer just surviving, you are learning how to vibrantly thrive. Look back at the incredible, grueling distance you have already covered. The little girl who thought she was fundamentally broken grew into a woman of unbreakable strength. You stared directly into the abyss of emotional abuse and boldly chose the light. You fought incredibly hard for your mind, and you finally won it back. Your future is a vast, beautiful blank canvas waiting for you. It is no longer stained by her constant criticisms or her heavy, suffocating expectations. You get to decide exactly what happiness looks like. You get to decide exactly what peace feels like. The pen is firmly in your hand, and she no longer dictates your own story. If no one has told you this lately, I need you to deeply hear it. I am so incredibly proud of you for choosing yourself. It took unimaginable courage to finally stop playing her rigged game. You are brilliant, you are deeply worthy, and you are whole. You are everything she desperately tried to convince you that you weren't. The ultimate victory over a narcissistic mother isn't an argument won. It isn't proving to the entire world that she is the villain. The ultimate, beautiful victory is simply living a life filled with profound peace, genuine joy, and authentic love. She gave you the blueprint for destruction. You used it to build a masterpiece.